let's mod our tabletop to have lots of fun and include some new stuff that we like to have in whatever our favorite system is. So this time, fields. What are fields? Well, a field is usually a place where magic has permeated so much the surroundings that it has created its own static effect, kind of like an enchantment. Just usually naturally, or as a result of a fallout of some sort of battle or something else that has happened magically or otherwise with energy at a given location. And well, whilst fields already exist, and D&D, say, for example, mentions them, usually they are mentioned only in the most important and greatest of magnitudes, say, situations like wild magic fields and dead magic fields. These, whilst interesting and important, and very much used, and quite a classic, they are just some of the extremes. We should also pay attention to existence of smaller fields. Fields that have evolved just a bit of an effect, but think how useful it is to have a bit of a beneficial effect to, say, your spells. Like if you had a field that doubles the area effect and range of every druid spell, and you were a druid, imagine how much that would help. And as a dungeon master, you have opportunity to think how people are using these fields when they have access to them, because this is interesting. You can customize your encounters with these whenever you have defenders at a static location. These people, or monsters or whoever they are, they may have a field that helps them because they have found it and entrenched there, and they're now using it. And they are very well familiar with it, whilst players are just entering, and without examining things carefully, players might not know what is happening, and they will notice that the enemy has some sort of custom and interesting advantage. And when enemies have some sort of custom and interesting advantage that is well explainable in the world and deepens world building and storytelling, now that's some good DMing. So you can use it as boost to your defenders in various ways. But you needn't overuse it just whenever it's appropriate to the feeling of the flow of the story, of the situation of the location, because these fields are opportunities. They also influence how the world works, because they are an important resource that people fight over to possess and they want to use. They are kind of like a locational mine that is, in some cases, not so exhaustible as much as it's better used there where it is, but then perhaps the place can be excavated for the effect. I talked about something like that in my Essences video, but anyways, the thing can be transplanted to a different location and used there. So now you have, even in an interior building or a faction, you have a field that they have brought there by, say, excavating the rock and making the whole floor and walls tiled with it, and the field has been successfully transplanted. Maybe at a diminished magnitude. Maybe when your party, when the adventurers visit the actual cave mouth of the volcano or whatever, they will find an even stronger field that this faction is using that they sampled when they were in one of their, smaller bases that they have in the city or whatever. And so on and so forth. This sort of world building is priceless for a dungeon master. But we can have fields used in different ways, not just to help the party's enemies. They are also good for just atmosphere and storytelling itself. For example, for the atmosphere, you can have some sort of floating levitational field, and it might not influence much if there are no people there to take use of it in any way, but it's an interesting thing for players to play around in and experience something new of going over the terrain. But the players might even experience an interesting battle or encounter or skill check in this area without the enemies trying to use it for themselves, because the enemies are also none of the wiser and nobody has taken a particular ownership of this terrain. Even if it doesn't really come to anything else than giggling about and rolling in air on the levitating field, that'll be quite a memorable thing that they have found, and if they research it in some way, they use their detections, they use their skills, they might find more about the backstory of the location, and it'll certainly be more decoration for the memorableness of the location itself. So that the location grows in the minds and imaginations of everyone. Then we have when location has a field because it's haunted in some way due to an event that happened before, and this doesn't need to be a strong field. It does much except show us the story more, or maybe has some little bit of mechanics related to that quest, to that haunted house, to that whole situation, but it's indeed more atmosphere and storytelling piece than it is a fighting type of thing. And indeed, many a clue can always be detected from the surroundings. You can have a field that is so subtle that it's not a field in the traditional sense that it projects an effect so much as there is something to be learned from the ambience of the whole thing, subtle as it is. Or sometimes these can be very powerful fields that are still really no more than a set piece. Say, the place where a dragon has fallen and what kind of chaos erupts around the remains of the body. That in itself can give all kinds of visions and effects, but not necessarily damage immediately or attack the players in any way, nor has it been necessarily used by opposition, but the players can experience all kinds of unique things in these. But then of course, we should also be clever and fair with our players, where occasionally we give them a field that they can use against the enemies more effectively, because the field is there and the enemies are unaware. But the players might become wise to it if they're now paying attention and they see a good field that they can use. Players will feel like they can solve a thing and be smart and be useful and do something cool and adventurous. So let's give them plenty of opportunities to do that. Not as many as people that have found fields and are using them defensively, because that's just by probability something that will happen more than players running into fields that aren't used and yet are beneficial to them specifically, but it'll still be a good proportion. And finally, let's not forget, some of the grandest fields are just miraculous, and the whole country, the whole continent makes pilgrimage to it, and it's a huge resource, unique place of reverence, perhaps worship, and something that changes the world as long as it exists in it. However complex and unreachable this type of field may or may not be, that is one of the ones that you can customize the most. Having a whole city, a whole mega dungeon, a whole religion, a whole economy, whole science rely on it in some or most ways. Sometimes even a whole continent is under the effect of a field due to its geological or cosmological or whatever position. So these are fields, and that is how you can use them for your own campaign. So, adventurer, if you thought this was unique, maybe you can spare me a click and I could see you here next, or even perhaps every week. Because there's lots of this where it came from, and I plan to give all of it to you. Welcome to the DM table. I'm M, and see you next time.